Thank you for joining us for another power-packed message from Dr. Myles Munroe, provided by Munroe Global Incorporated and MunroeGlobal.com. We transform followers into leaders and leaders into agents of change. We hope that this message is a blessing to you as you advance your life and discover your purpose. Now, let's go into the message.
Understanding that the kingdom is a practical implementation of heaven's government on earth is what makes us responsible for the conditions of earth. Nations are our responsibility. God did not leave the nations in the hands of government. God did not leave the nations in the hands of the government. God did not leave the nation in the hands of the government. Why? Because God is the creator of nations. Nations begin with God, and they are birthed by one human. In the book of Acts, chapter 17, Paul captures the concept of nations, their birth, their locations, and also their purposes. I think it might be a good place for us to start. So get your constitution that you have in front of you. Let's turn to section Acts, subsection 14, article 24. For those of you who are still religious, it's Acts chapter 17. Verse 24. Nations are God's property, and God creates nations. Everything God creates, He creates for a purpose, and He doesn't abandon it. As a matter of fact, in the book of Proverbs, one of the most exciting verses to me says, God will not abandon the works of His hands. That means when God creates something, He doesn't act as if it isn't His. Brief reference in the Constitution, section 17, article 24. And God made the world and everything in it, since He is Lord of heaven and earth. He is what? Lord. What does Lord means? Owner. He's the owner of heaven. That's the invisible territory where His headquarters is. And He's Lord of what? Earth. God never gave earth to man as a right of ownership. He gave man the management contract. He didn't give man ownership deeds. So He's still claiming the lordship, the ownership of earth. Read the next statement. He does not dwell in buildings or temples made with hands. So obviously God does not live in these places that we call churches and synagogues and temples. God doesn't dwell in buildings that man made. Obviously God has designed another temple for His residence, and that is your body. Verse 25. Nor is he worshipped with man's hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all men life, breath, and all things. Again, in a kingdom, the king owns how much? Everything. So you cannot give God anything. It says, don't even try to worship him with none, because it's already his. He doesn't need you to give him some vegetable. All these things we try to give back to God. He doesn't need that to make him God. Verse 26. And he has made from one man every nation of men. He has made from one man every nation of men. Who made every nation of men? He. Pawns in the hand of God, puppets on his strings. Read verse 26. He also chooses where they should dwell on all the face of the earth. He even chooses where the nations will be located. And he has determined their pre-appointed times. In other words, every nation is born at the right time. And according to this statement, there's a time when God will get rid of that nation. Nations are not forever. Many nations have died. You study history, some do not exist anymore. Like the USSR, which thought that it was the world ruler in Europe. The biggest mistake they ever made was to say there was no God. So now there is no USSR. So even your country and my country has a schedule in God's great calendar. And it's important to think that way, because sometimes when your nation begins to prosper, you begin to feel like you are the nation. And God has a way of keeping you humble. I remember in 1990 when I went to the United States to speak at a conference, I made a statement that caused a lot of problems, but I repeat it again and again. I don't care. And that is, America has had some ego problems, national ego problems, because the United States is the only nation who decided to play the World Series by herself. Think about it. The world has 190 nations, and they claim a game to be the World Series, and they play with themselves. They had this idea that no other nation was that important enough to be considered the world. What a tragedy. However, God says he pre-appoints the times that nations should exist. Look at the last part. He also predetermines the boundaries of their dwellings. God is the one who carves out where the boundaries of nations lie. You know, men cut things up and they recut and they reshape, but in the end, God gets the boundaries that he intended to have. Now, why did God do all of this? Verse 27. God is telling us why he created nations. And this is the foundation for discussing corruption. Underline verse 27, please. Because remember, everything has a purpose And where purpose is not known, what happens? You abuse the thing. So God doesn't only create nations, he specifically tells us why he created nations. He said, I did this so that they should seek the Lord. What does the Lord mean? What does the Lord mean? He says, I create nations so that the nation could seek who owns it. Verse 27, and they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope or pursue or crave for him and find him. He says, right through the entire national psyche should be a hunger, a passion, and a pursuit for God. Now, if you look at the United States, for example, they are doing the complete opposite at the moment. They are pursuing passionately to extract God out of the nation. The future of the United States is predictable. And I believe that the United States is lacking honest prophets. Because you don't need to receive a rhema word to prophesy about America anymore. Her actions can make the youngest believer prophesy. He made nations so that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. God says, look, I'm close to your country, but you're going to have to desire me for me to show up. Let me tell you what that means. If a nation doesn't want God, God leaves. Very polite. Look at that. He says, I'm not far away, but if you don't pursue me, don't have a passion for me, you have no interest, you want to get rid of me, he says, I'll go. I'll leave you to your own destruction. For 28, because in him we live and move and have our being. Stop reading. Most of you quote this as something personal. This is not written personally. It's in the context of what? Nations. He said, let me tell you, nation, something. In me, your economy is held together. In me, you are protected from wars. I keep your life safe. In me, you have your very existence. He's making a national statement. So when you begin as a country to gather all your trained experts and economists and psychologists and national cultural specialists and all of your social behavioral scientists to try and build and put this nation together, God laughs. You should read Psalm 2. It says, the nations conspire and God laughs in heaven. You know where you're from. I'm afraid for America. I'm afraid for Haiti. You know what I'm talking about, Pastor? When you begin, you see, let me break something down to you that's very important. God judges sin based on its category. Write that down, very important. How does God judge sin? Okay, so if you commit private sin, that means personal private sin, God will then judge you privately. But if you make your sin a community sin, in other words, this community practice a certain kind of lifestyle that is a sin, then God will judge the whole community. If you make the sin a national sin, then now God has to judge the nation. And when you make the sin, let's go one more step, a constitutional sin. That means you institutionalize it in the Constitution. Now God has to destroy your very existence as a country. Because whatever constitutes you gives you existence. So when you put in your Constitution sin and attempt to institutionalize it, which is happening right now in most countries, and including America, then God has to judge the nation nationally and constitutionally. Corruption at the highest level is when Sodom and Gomorrah made it a constitutional right for a man to sleep with a man and a woman with a woman. See, God couldn't judge that city anymore privately. If you stay in the closet, you'll have closet judgment. Hope you guys listen to me. See, you may think, well, I'm not doing it, so, God will judge them. No. They are trying to get it in the Constitution. And you constitute the nation. So God told Abraham, he said, Abraham, the stench of Sodom, the scent, has filled my nostrils. Don't pray for them. Don't even ask me to change my mind. Why? Because it's now institutionalized sin. So I have to destroy the whole nation. So get your nephew out of there. I was watching the CNN news this morning. And they have a special on now on CNN, a review. Actually, today, China and Korea are getting together today. They're having military exercises. Never in the history of our lifetime. The largest army in the world, and Russia and China are involved in military. You don't understand what I'm talking about. When I saw it on TV, the scriptures came in my mind. It says, the dragon from the north and the bear from the north shall come down. And I'm thinking, this can't be happening while I'm alive. The symbol of Russia is the bear, and the symbol of China, is the dragon. And Revelation says when they get together, they will come down to make war with me, referring to Israel. And so, America can do nothing about it. I guess my point is, Is America attracting judgment? Think about it. Yeah. America needs to be careful. So does your country, wherever you're from. So does the Bahamas. That's why I keep publicly saying God lives in the Bahamas. I'm saying that because I want him to hear it. Now you got to start saying it for your own country, because if you don't make it clear, then you might be in danger. Roe versus Wade is institutionalized sin. I guarantee you, if you mark that date, you will find that from that date on, something happened to the country. It started going in a weird direction, because God has to judge nationally. He says, I did this so that men may seek me, because in me they live and move and have their very being. No nation should ever think that they exist by themselves, for themselves, with themselves, and on themselves, or I will destroy them, just like I did Russia in one day. How did God create Israel? In one day. It doesn't take God long to destroy a people. Look how quickly God destroyed the security of the United States. One day. And he did it with everybody watching. Don't play with the creator of nations. One day I'm going to write a book on this, because this needs to get in the hands of every politician or those who want to be politicians. They don't understand what they're dealing with. You're not dealing with legislation and bills. You're dealing with an invisible assignment that is tied to your survival. Finally, verse 29. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, something shaped by art and man's devising. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands who? All nations everywhere to what? Change their minds fast. Because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world how? In righteousness, verse 31, by the man whom he has ordained, which is Jesus Christ. He has given assurance of this by all by raising him from the dead. Ladies and gentlemen, let's try and wrap this kingdom thing up. He says, I'm going to judge every nation against the kingdom that Jesus established. Let's talk about corruption very quickly. Write this down. What is corruption? We are dealing with the subject of corruption in the context of the kingdom. What is corruption? Number one, corruption is the violation of accepted values, morals, standards, and behaviors. Generally, definition. Now, it doesn't say whose values and whose morals yet. Corruption is when anyone violates values and morals and standards and behaviors that we have agreed to accept. Let me take it one step further. Corruption is the pursuit of personal gain at the expense of the value or respect for others. Corruption is when you go after what you want and you don't care who gets hurt. Thirdly, corruption is the sacrifice of correct principles and practices and conscience. Anything that makes you sacrifice principles that nature has proven to be correct, which are designed by God, obviously, and principles that have been proven to be humane. When you sacrifice them, you are corrupt. Number 4, corruption is the breaking of covenant. It's a breaking of a covenant. That one is so simple, but it's so profound. You swear on the Bible to represent your constituency by a certain standard. That means you made a covenant with that constituency. You put your hand on the Bible or whatever book, and you swear to lead the country according to certain standards and certain codes and certain values and morals and commitments. That's a covenant with the people. You swear to oversee this department in government based on the rules and laws established by the Constitution, which is for the protection and preservation of the people's rights, and you break that, that's a covenant. Corruption is when you break a covenant. You ever wonder why Paul says if a man wants to be in charge of God's church, the qualifications are very strange. He didn't say he shall go to college and get a degree in theology, a PhD in divinity, and an MBA in spiritism. He says, first of all, he should be married to one woman. In other words, if you cannot keep a covenant with one person, how dare I believe you can keep it with 5 million? Uh-oh. And so when my beloved President Clinton said these words, what I do in my private life has no bearing on my public performance, he disqualified himself before God from being a political leader in a nation. Corruption. What's the source of corruption? I thought I should put this in because this is important, and I won't finish this. I know that because our time is just about gone, but I want to give you some thoughts to think about. First of all, corruption begins with some problems. Oppression can produce corruption. When people have been oppressed for a long time, it breeds a spirit of corruption because they've been deprived of things that they feel they deserve. And when they finally get free from that oppression, God help us, they will kill their own brother to pursue what they believe they deserve. Number 2, corruption is caused by low self-esteem. If you don't have an high estimation about yourself, then you will literally degrade other people in order to prop up your self-esteem. So you start abusing people, abusing position to elevate and try and compensate for your lack of self-esteem. Number 3, corruption is caused by a poor self-concept. And now if you look at number 1, it usually breeds all of these. A poor self-concept brings corruption because it breeds corruption, because when you have a low picture of yourself, that means you feel inferior. Then in order for you to be superior, you got to make others feel inferior and do whatever is necessary to make that sure. So you will oppress your own people, degrade your own brothers and family to prop up your own image. It's the seat of corruption. Dr. Horn and I were chatting this morning briefly about King Herod. And you know, King Herod was a strange guy, very corrupt. King Herod killed his own sons because he was afraid that they might kill him and take his throne. So he killed his own kids. That is the height of low self-concept. He had no security. He was not secured, and so he even killed his family. Political corruption is powerful. Another source of corruption is materialism. If you notice again, all these are tied to the first one. Oppression is demonic because oppression produces all of these problems. As a matter of fact, I want to highly recommend to all of you, please, I highly recommend, and I think you heard Eddie Long talk about this last night. He said it's the best book everyone should read. It's called The Burden of Freedom. This book is about oppression and what it does to you. When you read this book, you'll begin to see that you are still oppressed. Everybody. There's some areas that you're still struggling with. It took me 10 years to write this one book because I had to do so much research in the mind of the oppressed. I list in here 10 specific things that oppressed people produce. These are just some of them on the list. And I do whole chapters on them. There's a whole chapter just on low self-esteem and how it impacts society. Every third world country, I recommend this book to. This book, when I walked into the president of Nigeria's house, I'll never forget it. My wife and I were invited there for breakfast. And we went to the palace, and he was sitting, you know, he came and greeted me at the door. Nice guy, hugged me and everything. And we went, and he took me into the sitting room, and we were chatting. And there on the table was this book. And it was all like dog-eared, you know. And he said, he said, all of my cabinet members are required to read that. He said, this book describes the problem of Africa. I told him, sir, it describes the problem of all humans. He said, this book explains corruption. It tells you why there's corruption in politics, in the church, and in your family. Next, corruption is a product of the spirit of immediate gratification. People want things now, and they'll kill you to get it. Because oppression does not produce patience. It produces suspicion. And if I am suspicious that you might take what I got, I can get rid of you. Secondly, I'm going to pile up a lot of what I think I might lose. So you wonder why a leader in a government would deposit $2 billion in a Swiss bank while his people are dying and starving. It's simple to understand. It's not complicated. For 20 years of his life, he was a zero. So he's trying to make sure, just in case anything happens, I got enough to cover myself. And maybe my children, because, sometimes they don't want the kids even involved in that. Corruption. And then corruption is caused by poor ethics. Corruption is also caused by low morals. We all know these ones. Corruption is also caused by no spiritual accountability. When people are not afraid of God, corruption is at a high level. When there is no awareness that I have to account to God for my behavior, that there is a God somewhere, there's a greater accountability somewhere, then corruption has no limits. You become your own standard, and so you make decisions based on what is expedient for you. And that becomes the heart of corruption. This one I want to put in. Corruption also comes from demonic influence. The Bible talks about leaders who were influenced by demons and oppressed their people. Oppression can produce demonic influence and sometimes demonic possession. And you have leaders in government who are literally possessed with demons. And the Bible talks about the prince of Persia. Persia was a country, and the word prince means ruler. There was an actual king over Persia, but there was a prince behind the prince. There was a demonic influence that was making laws in the country through this man that was destroying babies. I don't want you to put it too far that maybe it's possible, and I am not saying it is, evident, but it could be possible that members of a Supreme Court could be shadowed by demonic powers and producing legislation and advice and making laws that are instigated by demonic influence. I mean, let's be honest. 550,000 babies are now killed every year in America by one law that someone made. Now, there's got to be someone behind that law who prefer death rather than life. Corruption. Couple of verses. I'm going to finish this next year, okay? Matter of fact, I can tell you, I'm going to do a book on this, just a book on nations and corruption, because right now the nations don't know what to do with corruption. When I sat with the president of Nigeria, I'll never forget his words. He says, "What do I do? I have a cabinet, and they got problems." I know what he meant. He said, I don't know what to do. They don't know what to do with it. When corruption becomes institutionalized, you got to almost destroy the nation first before you rebuild it. And you might not survive the destruction yourself as the leader. Proverbs 14:34 says what? Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people. Proverbs 33 verse 12. Blessed is the nation whose God is who? The Lord, the people who he chose for his inheritance. He said that nation would be blessed if their God is who? The Lord. Now keep in mind that there are many gods around during this time David's talking. He said, but if your Lord is not God, the owner of all created things, then your nation will not be blessed. We have a pastor here from Haiti, and he'll tell you stories about Haiti, how the government officially institutionalized demonic leadership over their country, sacrificed a pig in the public square to the devil, and made Satan Lord of Haiti. Publicly, officially did it. Read this verse again. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Which means if you read this in the antithesis, you will have a revelation. And so America is removing God from everything. So they are literally setting themselves up for a curse. Huh? I tell people, I say, in the Bahamas we believe in Jehovah God. We believe in the God of the Judeo-Christian faith. That's the God we put in our Constitution. Now, if you are a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Muslim, whatever, you come here and worship. But don't you ever attempt to insist that we adopt your God as our national allegiance. Because you can have your private judgment, but don't try to make it a national judgment. We don't want God to judge us nationally. We want God to bless us nationally. Can I hear an amen? Amen. When you read the influence of politics, you see Joseph. Joseph brought prosperity to Egypt. Daniel brought prosperity to Babylon. Why? Because when the righteous rule, the blessing comes to the nation. Even on the wicked who's in the nation. That's the point I'm making. God blessed Pharaoh, and Pharaoh was not a believer. He was made to believe afterwards, but he wasn't a believer. But God blessed him because the righteous man was put in influence over everything, and God had to bless the nation. How do you protect yourself from corruption politically? Number one, spiritual accountability. Number two, principles. Got to live by principles. Number three, spiritual laws. Number four, values that are in keeping with those laws. Number five, you got to have some standards. Set standards that you will not violate. Number six, you must love God. Now, this may sound interesting, but if you want to protect your country from political corruption, there's got to be a love for God. Because when you love God, you fear God. And the fear of God is what? The beginning of wisdom. See, when a man doesn't fear God, he will abort a baby. If a man doesn't think that he'll have to be called on an account for a certain law, he'll make the law. I mean, I would hate to be sitting in cabinet having to decide on the bill for same-sex marriages. Because, you know, I have an accountability not to the Rainbow Coalition. I got an accountability to God who can judge me because my name is signed on this list. So I got to love God. What did Jesus say? If you love me, you will do what? Keep my commandments. See, you don't keep God's commandments, you know, unless you love him. Talk about that in this book. Last of all, love for God's image. That means people. No man can say he loves God and hates his brother. If you want people to no longer be corrupt in politics, they got to fall in love with people. That means they'll never do anything to harm people, to hurt people, to abuse people, to oppress people, to suppress people, to violate people's honor and their respect. You have an awareness that people are God's image. And every decision you make in political environments would be made with that awareness that, look, I don't just have a duty to carry out. I have people to love. If you don't love people, you will be corrupt. Here's a couple of verses and we're going to pray. Proverbs 29 verse 4. Read it loud. Go. By justice a king gives what? A country stability. But one who is greedy for bribes tears it down. When a leader likes bribes, destroys the country. Proverbs 30 verse 21 says what? Under three things the earth trembles. Now he lists three, but I couldn't believe the first one God listed. He said the three things the earth cannot handle. It trembles under three things. And the first one is a servant who becomes a king. That means a slave who's put in top positions. Somebody in charge who got a slave mentality. He said the earth can't handle that kind of corruption. When somebody been oppressed and they become a leader, God says the earth begins to shake. Read the last one. Go. Better is a poor man but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer knows how to take warning. In other words, you know, you got some fellows who's supposed to be resigned a long time ago. Keep that verse, because it's an important verse. He says, I'd rather have a young guy who don't know much in charge than an old man who knows his time, you don't know his time is over. So he's making decisions that are senseless, but he loves power. God says, give me a fool who's young. At least I can train him. Someone says, you know, my friend, Mr. Mugabe, wouldn't let go because they figure if he let go, he might go to jail. And most of the leaders who started the revolutionaries of independence and freedom, their time is just about gone. And the ones that are holding on are causing more problems than blessings. Corruption. Right? These are the ones who actually kill their oppositions. The young opposition, they actually kill them off because the Bible says they would not take warning. Here's another one. Read Proverbs 28:3. A ruler who oppresses the poor is like a driving rain that leaves no crops. Proverbs 28:16. A tyrannical ruler lacks judgment, but he who hates ill-gotten gain will enjoy a long life. Proverbs 29:12. If a ruler listens to lies, isn't this not? That means if your cabinet are lying to you, your colleagues in leadership lying to you, if a ruler listens to lies, all of his officials become wicked. When your consultants are evil, all of your agendas and conclusions will be evil. So you can't have corrupt people around you and hope to make pure decisions. Sometimes the first thing you should do is clean out the cabinet. When you come in, you gotta find a way to diplomatically clean house. The Bible says it. If you listen to lies, the whole cabinet becomes wicked.
Thank you once again for listening to this message, as we hope that it has been a blessing to you. Our goal is to show you new paths and opportunities so that you can discover your purpose. It is your love, support, and partnership that makes Munroe Global possible. Please visit us online at www.munroeglobal.com for more product, partnership, or to join us at one of our live events around the world.
You don't have to be mean. You don't have to stay close. As long as you're somewhere out there, that's enough for me. I don't need to hold you near me, don't need promises to keep. Just the thought that you are breathing somewhere in this world I see. Even if I'm not beside you, even if you never know, there's a quiet kind of comfort just in knowing you still glow. I don't need forever, I just need you to exist. You don't have to stay with me, you don't have to feel the same. Just as long as you're still out there, calling softly through my days. You don't have to look my way, you don't have to be my home. It's enough to know you're living in a world I'm not alone. I won't chase you through the distance, won't disturb your chosen life. I'll just keep you in my silence, like a star that shines at night. Through the dark and through the blue, I still think of you. You don't have to stay with me, you don't have to feel the same. Just as long as you're still out there, calling softly through my days. You don't have to look my way, you don't have to be my home. It's enough to know you're living in a world I'm not alone. I don't need to be your light, I don't need to cross your mind. All I need is just the truth that you're somewhere still alive. You don't have to stay with me, you don't have to feel the same, just as long as you're still out there, calling softly through my days. You don't have to look my way, you don't have to be my home. It's enough to know you're living in a world out